Secretary, please call the roll. Thank you, Anne Marie.
Ms. Foreman? Here. Mrs. Farrell? Here. Mrs. Kelly? Here. Mr. Philby?
Here.
Councilman Bartolomeo?
Here.
Mayor Delaney?
Here.
Mr. Levine?
Here.
And Chairman O'Connor.
Here. Also, I'd like to say that Keith Barrett and Floyd Perucci, our legal counsel, is here, and Dan Kaufman of Negligent Engineering. Can you please rise to salute flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In compliance with New Jersey's Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the Public Law 1975, I hereby declare that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided, specifying that this meeting will be held on this date in the Municipal Building, Council Chambers, second floor, 55 River Road, Edgewater, New Jersey. Notice of this meeting was sent to the record in the Jersey Journal and posted in the lobby of the Borough Hall as required by law. While we're waiting, let me just go over a few things. We do have a meeting in December. It's December 18th, Tuesday, December 18th. We should have two things on the agenda. Personal note, Mayor Delaney, just want to thank you and all the borough employees and people that worked during Hurricane Sandy. I think you did a great job, and thank you for your leadership. We're just waiting for the plan. Anything else? Just give us back on how we got to that.
Sure. On the agenda this evening is the consideration or review of an ordinance number 1485-2012 entitled An Ordinance of the Borough of Edgewater, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 240 of the Borough Code to eliminate the B2A zone, create the new MXD1, MXD2, and MXD3 zones, and to amend and supplement certain other regulations, including those provided to the R5 zone. The Municipal Council has held a first reading of this ordinance and referred the matter to the Planning Board. Pursuant to the Municipal Land Use Law, anytime there is an ordinance or amendment to a land use regulation that is going to be enacted by Municipal Council, they have to provide the Planning Board the opportunity to review, comment, and report on anything that they feel appropriate and inappropriate about the proposed ordinance. And that's what this is going to be. This will be a standard vote. We have the planner will be here shortly and will take us through the basics of the ordinance and some of the amendments to the zone regulation. We do have what should be readily visible, so we can bring those over so that be viewed by the public and by members of the Planning Board, that will show the new zones as compared to the old zones. But this is something that you should not be unfamiliar with, because, perfect timing, because at prior meetings you reviewed certain land use elements of the master plan amendments, school facilities and land use elements of the master plan, and we made those recommendations and sent those recommendations to the Municipal Council, and based on those amendments to the master plan, the new ordinance was crafted. So we'll give the planner a moment just to catch her breath, and then we'll ask her to just address and provide the background and the fairly brief but a description of the changes to the proposed zoning ordinance and land use regulations. And once that is made, you'll feel free to ask any questions you might have, and then there should be a vote as to whether or not you feel if there are any changes or anything, you just want to accept the ordinance as is.
Okay. I'm going to go over the backs.
Okay.
The proposed ordinance that's before the Borough Council is extremely similar to those recommendations that were contained within the master plan. The major difference would be the addition of a third mixed-use district. If you recall, in the land use plan, we had a mixed-use 1 and a mixed-use 2 district of 5 and 14 stories. That was really the distinguishing factor. There are some other bulk regulations that differ, but through conversations with John Delmo and with other council members, what we figured out is that there was another development hotel that was approved that was 9 stories indeed. So we created a new MXD3 zone, and while the order is a little bit off because we kept the 1 and the 2 at the 5 and 14, the MXD3 comes in at the 9 stories. So what we really have is a gradation of levels of the mixed-use district, and that would be 5 stories, 9 stories, and 14 stories. And again, the mixed-use 3 district adopts the same bulk regulations as the mixed-use 1. So I hope that's not too confusing. But that location would be over here, located where those Moss's properties. So when you take a look at the map, you can see that it's right there, which would be adjacent to the MXD1 and proposed MXD2. One of the other differences between the recommendations that was contained in the land use element would be the addition of some definitions as well. So what you can see contained within the zoning ordinance are there's some specific definitions for the mixed-use districts. We address such thing as floor area ratio, gross floor area, impervious surface. And all of these were worked out in conjunction with our land use administrator and also Dan Hoffman, our engineer. So those would be the 2 differences between what was contained within the land use element and what is proposed within this particular document, the actual ordinance itself. And obviously, it's crafted to address each of the 3 zones. The intent of all of the mixed-use districts is still the same, to create that pedestrian-friendly, walkable type of environment. And just as well, as you know, what we've also done in our ordinance is create some bonus density regulations for the creation of affordable housing, which is one of the other things that also was contained in the land use element, but did follow through to the ordinance. So first, I just identified the differences, and as just as well, we made recommendations for the R5 zone. We did talk about that sliding scale of lot coverage to height to hopefully open up some of the views towards the water and towards New York City skyline. So those are basically the biggest overviews of the ordinance, but in effect, like I said, the only material changes would be the addition of a mixed-use district and the addition of some specific definitions.
And Captain, maybe just to point out for the record that even though this has been presented to the board before, that this whole process was started because the zoning board of adjustment had been inundated with a significant number of zoning variance applications, I should say, and that the planner undertook the review of the land use elements, the master plan and the land use elements in particular, to have the zoning more accurately reflect what has actually occurred in the borough, particularly the southern portion of the borough, for the past 10 years. So while these are significant zoning changes or proposed zoning changes, they are in actuality reflect many of the approvals that have already been granted and the buildings that have already been constructed.
That is correct, and that was, again, discussed when we did the land use element. Actually, I wanted to take the time to address, there was a couple of concerns of the public at the council meeting, and what I wanted to address was that, particularly in the list of parcels, lot 89, lot 8 should be eliminated. It is shown as existing zone being OR1 and recommended to an MXD1 zone, but on the map, it is not shown to be changed. And the intent is not to change it, so that was a typo on my fault. That was my fault. I'm not quite sure why that was in there. It was never reflected on the map. It was never changed on the map, so that should be eliminated from the list.
So it's your recommendation, just so I'm clear, it's your recommendation that when the planning board issue a report that they consider suggesting removal of block 89, lot 8 from page 13 of the proposed ordinance?
Yes, but yes, I mean, that could be a recommendation, and when I go before the council again on this, that it needs to be eliminated, because that was never the intent. And again, I don't quite know why I included it, unless just through doing a spreadsheet, I accidentally added a different line. I'm not quite sure. But there was also a couple of questions about lot 86, 20.02. It was stated that that was an easement. It is borough-owned, but it's not an easement. There was a 10-foot easement on the property. It's currently B-Zone B4. We recommended for MXD1. The difference as to why we did not recommend it to be public was that the portions of town are indeed zoned public. Most of them were in conjunction with the Rossi list when we got the Green Acres funding. So that's why we had to rezone them public, to make sure that they were on the encumbered list. So therefore, the public makes it encumbered versus here where a borough may own a piece of property, but a borough might also want to sell it at some point in time. So therefore, there's really no reason not to rezone that particular piece of property due to its location. And while I don't think the pump station is going away, which is block 93, lot 1.02, you never know what's going to happen. Again, it was in the R1 zone, it was never in a public zone. It was recommended for MXD2. The planning board can or cannot make that recommendation. I don't feel that it's a fatal flaw to leave it as a recommendation to the MXD2. But again, that's really, I guess, a decision of the planning board whether or not they believe that that should be addressed and be made public. And those were the issues that were outlined at the last council meeting. And I did spend about a half an hour outside with some of the residents to address some of their concerns or questions. I mean, some were questions, some were concerns regarding this ordinance. Because our list includes block and lots. One of the comments was, why do you include addresses? Legally, we listed by block and lot. And while it's a little bit more difficult to go and look at the tax maps and what have you, I can certainly provide individual listings if a resident wanted me to provide an address, but legally we need to provide the block and lot for this list for the zoning. So I think that's about it.
Any questions from the board?
Was expecting to see the overlay that time?
I don't think they,
No.
Kathy, we switched from MXD 1 and 2, we added the MXD 3. You mentioned that's the Moss property.
Yes.
It's also, isn't it another property? Is one approval for a hotel, isn't there another approval? Is that the May or?
May Bail.
The May Bow project. What was that? The May Bow project was 8 stories, actually.
All right, so that's going into the MXD 3.
So this map, again, this map should read over here.
Okay.
And we can include the May Bow property into the MXD3 zone, which is limited to 9 stories, we approved for 8, limited to 9 stories versus 14 stories. My recommendation would actually probably be to rezone this entire thing, MXD3. Initially we just were going with the 2 zones, and then we found out about this approval, which was prior to my tenure here in the borough. I would recommend that the entirety of this area be rezoned to the MXD3 zone in that case. But that's up to the planning board. I was going to bring that back up at the council level, but I just want to bring that up here as well.
Well, the reason I asked that question is that whole area fits more into MXD3 now.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, I would agree with you. I think, any comment from the board on that? I think we should make a recommendation that that changes. Okay? All right, anybody else from the board? We open for the public? Mary? State your name, spell your last name, and your address.
Mary Hogan, 606 Undercliff Avenue, H-O-G-A-N. I had a couple of questions on this from the council meeting, which I'm going to ask again. And they're mostly really for the plan. In terms of this was a question we had, and you were going to look into it. You list on your group of things, lot 88, lot 11. It's listed as west of Thompson Lane. it's 88, 11, 12, and 13, which does not appear on the tax maps, and you were indicating because of the subdivisions, the tax map might not be up to date. But you're moving it from a B2 to an R5, so I was wondering what property that is. See, I'm a visual person, so I went through them and
Okay, I can tell you
street
exactly where that
addresses
is.
and names. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That would be the Aventine property.
So that's Aventine?
That's Aventine, yes.
And in the ordinance, it gives a breakdown of what these other things are, but it doesn't give what the R5 is.
The R5 is still the, should be listed, multifamily residential district. It is listed in the ordinance. There's a list that starts on page 2, continues on page 3, that lists all of the districts. The R5, while it's been modified, the identifying factor has not been changed, but the title of the zone has not been changed.
Okay, what I'm talking about is later, you list, which is very helpful, you list, sorry, I gotta find the page that it's on. Oh, I guess it's here, but you didn't put it in the page that. I'm sorry, it's just like so many pages here.
Page 14.
No, I see it here now, but what's the height? See, and once you put the list, and I was going by the list that has the heights. Somewhere in there is a list that says.
Page 14.
That's what I said, 14, Mary. Here.
It's in the table on 14.
Oh, this is different.
Yes, one, yes.
There you
Have
go.
another
Mary,
copy.
we have a new one here, I don't know, right here.
Is that right down there?
So it is page 14,
Well,
right?
it's page 16 on the actual ordinance, because I had requested from the borough clerk a copy. This is what she
Okay.
answered to me as my, under my OPA request, so this is what has been introduced.
Okay, this is what we're
On this,
looking
it's page 16, I don't know.
Okay.
If I have it on yours. Anyway, the R5, yes, on this one, do you have the 16, page 16?
Well, actually, it's on my page 14 as well, but.
Do you have what, you
I
don't
think
have
it's
the R5 across what they are listed as? Minimum lot area, minimum width?
Yes, I do. I have mid-rise and high-rise. It's R5, the.
Oh, it's that's what I was asking.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
the
these
R5
two.
row is blank, but then under it is mid-rise and high-rise.
And what about senior, is that an R5?
And yes, and
Okay.
senior is also, I think that, this was actually recreated by our attorney, and so it looks as though each of those are individual zones, and they are not. And so perhaps what we need to do is just reformat that for it to read properly. The mid-rise, the high-rise, and senior are all contained within the R5 zone. And then separately, the MXD1, MXD2, and MXD3 zones are specific zones.
So when we're talking about this being the Aventine, and you're putting it into the R5 zone, how big is the Aventine? Which, in other words, which of these three would it fit into? The mid-rise, the high-rise, or senior? Obviously, it's not senior. Is it the mid-rise or the high-rise? Is it 6 stories or 20? Or is this cover everything in between? I don't know. I mean, do you build one or the other, or?
Well, no, typically that's what you would do.
Okay. Because I didn't know that the Aventine was 20, but I thought it was higher than 6. I didn't know.
I honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah,
Okay, I'm just wondering if it, since I didn't have it on the map, I don't know if it really fits into the R5.
It's not that high.
it's not that tall of a building. It starts very tall because it's.
Well, that's what I'm asking, is it called the mid-rise, is it
So-
6-story?
I mean, I believe that it would fall into the mid-rise category, but
Mid-rise.
I'm gonna have to double check. I do not have every development.
No, I understand that, but I just didn't know what that one was, so I couldn't check out ahead of time what it was. Okay.
I know that I have the information because I did utilize it during the land use element process. So I can answer that question, but I just need to
Yeah,
research it.
yeah, because we have the council.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. This is a question on, and we're working on different pages, I don't know.
Maybe it would be helpful if you just refer to the section heading.
It's in one of the whereases, it has to do with affordable housing.
Okay.
I have it on page 2, I don't know. Of yours. And part of this will be more of legal questions. It talks about affordable housing units proposed through inclusionary development.
Yes.
Now, inclusionary means development that requires to have affordable housing, but does that necessarily mean that the units have to be on site?
I just want to read the definition to make sure.
Well, I can answer that question.
But I'm just asking from a legal, because I'm sure this was.
Oh, well, from okay. An established precedent in the borough of Edgewater is that the units can be provided off-site. We have provided documentation within the proposed bulk table that they are permitted to be located off-site. But I guess as it is a legal question, I guess I would.
Well, it is because now, I don't know if we have conflicting ordinances. Because we have an ordinance in terms of affordable housing that is not included on site. The developer has two choices. They have the choice to put it on site, or they have the choice to put it off site within the borough. But that site has to be approved by the mayor and council.
And that's my understanding of what this definition of inclusionary housing is, because nothing in here states that it has to be quote unquote on site. Now, that being said, there may be a requirement in a particular redevelopment plan that has been approved by the council where it does require on-site. So as a general rule, I believe it's not required on-site, but it can be subject to an individual redevelopment agreement.
But what I'm asking is, this paragraph would not negate the other ordinance which says you must come before the mayor and council to approve any on-site.
No.
That's not located within, it has to be located within the borough of Edgewater.
No, anytime you prepare an ordinance, that they have to be read together. And the way under a legal interpretation of an ordinance, you want to read them so they provide meaning to all words. And the only consistent way to read those ordinances is together. And so if you provide inclusionary here, and it permits off-site, for off-development affordable housing, there's nothing in here that negates the requirement that they come before the mayor and council to address the location or the approval of location. So you have to read them together, and there's nothing here that would be in direct contradiction to the other ordinance that we're negating it.
Okay, because what's happened in the past is sometimes developers are reading this section of our code, and the affordable housing is actually in another section of the code that they're not, so that you have to read different areas to get the definitions, as to what's required. I just don't want to have, because one of the things it says, inclusionary zoning may apply to all zones.
Yes, meaning
So it does
that if
not.
you're going to build anywhere, that means that there can be an affordable housing requirement in any zone that you build in.
Okay, so if I'm building a 6-family home and I have to provide affordable housing,
I'm not sure what the question is.
I either have to put it there or come before the mayor and council and ask them where I can, if I say I have this other site I'm going to apply it to, I can do that.
Well, candidly, I am not familiar with that particular ordinance. Based on what you've represented, I would say yes, but I don't have a specific familiarity with that component of the ordinance.
But apparently it's not within an ordinance that has to do with the master plan.
Well, this is just what this is, what you have before you is the amendment.
Right.
And so to the extent that there are other ordinance or other provisions of the ordinance that have not been changed or altered, there's no requirement that they be contained in this ordinance. Obviously, you have to read the entire ordinance for context. So, but there's nothing in here that expressly contradicts that provision of the ordinance.
Okay. The other problem that I have with this paragraph is you're talking about giving financial incentives to developers for affordable housing, but the reality is the requirements for affordable housing is, and other incentives. But the requirements for affordable housing is not a choice of the developer. It's required by law. And I don't understand why you're giving financial incentives when they are required by law to provide it.
Hey, Catherine.
I'm unaware that they're required by law. At least in what we're operating in now is the fact that we're not allowed to actually provide zones that have a set aside. We can't say you have to put 20% of your units as affordable housing in a particular zone. Right now, we can't actually do that. The only thing we can do is provide these financial incentives. This paragraph is directly from code, from codes, the legislative code. And so that's why it says financial incentives, i.e. financial incentives would be a density bonus, an FAR bonus. Those are the type of things we're talking about. So again, it also says incentives. So that would be the incentive. Why the rules are written that way, I don't know. If it is a requirement, I don't know why it's not a requirement like it was in round 1 and round 2, but we know that we've had problems with round 3. So the only thing we can do right now is provide these financial incentives. Not every zone is required to have affordable housing. It was at one time, but it isn't now. So we have to try to provide these incentives to get any more affordable housing.
Yeah, right now, Ms. Hogan, the current status of COA at the state is there have been multiple challenges to the regulations, and right now there are no active regulations, and it's still in the courts. We have no idea exactly what a developer's obligation or what the municipality's obligation is with regards to COA.
So the Mount Laurel decision has been struck down?
No, I'm
I
not
have
saying
not read
that.
that yet.
Well, no, I'm not saying that it's been shut down. There are regulations that implement affordable housing requirements that have been set forth in the myriad of Mount Laurel cases and statutory enactment. And the 5-for-1, the 4-for-1, all the various regulations that dictate how much affordable housing must be constructed, the size of the affordable housing, where it has to go. Right now, there are no rules. So the courts have said you require affordable housing. The state said, great, I'll promulgate rules.
I'm sorry.
And the state promulgated those rules, and then they were struck down. And so right now, the courts have said, go back and figure it out. And that was years ago, and they are, I think, 5 years behind on actually having a declaration of what the appropriate rules are for both developers and municipalities to govern development by. So at this point, we're using this type of language, and we can do it through.
I thought it was I'm sorry, I thought it was the camera.
I apologize.
I'm
It's all
sorry.
right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To sum it up, right now there are no rules, and so we're trying to figure out exactly, no one can predict what the COA requirements and what the COA obligations of both developers and municipalities are going to be.
So a developer could come in and say, I'm not putting any affordable housing.
No, he can't, because that's not what the current ordinance of the borough says.
But what about the state? I mean, we had our ordinances, and then they said, yeah, but the state supersedes.
Well, right now, there are no state regulations that are an application for round 3. We don't know what the requirements are. So that has been, some developers have thought that's been a boom because they're trying to get in there before the regulations do. They say that they're grandfathers, others are just trying to wait it out. The market, obviously the financial markets over the last 3-4 years have dictated a slowdown in building. But right now, what this, and really what's on, all this is sort of run far-flung in this discussion, because right now, we're not changing any of the code requirements in this ordinance. There's still, this proposed ordinance, there's still your code requirement, and under your ordinance, and we're complying with that until we're told the state says otherwise.
So what's being built now is, well, if they want to build, unless they want to take a chance and build and not have to give us affordable housing, is based on our COA rules and regulations. Our ordinances cover COA.
That's right, is that right?
Anything that's been approved up until now, I mean, it's subject to whatever the regulations were at the time it was approved. This is for whatever's going forward, and mind you, I know that I believe that there were some oral arguments, I want to say a week and a half ago, before it was Supreme Court on COA's issues. And so I don't know if another decision is going to be made soon, if the rules are going to be changed. But I think we're all pretty well aware that as soon as those changes happen, Edgewater will address it. We will change the ordinance to comply with whatever those regulations are. The fact is, right now, going forward, we at least want to try to provide these incentives as outlined in the current regulations, so that we're not playing catch up later. And it very well may be a financial incentive for a developer, or it may get the housing. Or there might be a time where the new rules come out, and those are going to apply, because we're going to be on the ball. I mean, I have to keep up with this on a daily basis, because we don't want to be exposed. We don't,
Well, we are right now, apparently, right?
Well, we do have ordinances in place for existing developments, so we are getting stuff built. We have had contributions to our affordable housing fund, so things have been happening. The fact is now, going forward, while we've tried to address the third round rules, while some of them have been, challenged and found invalid, the only thing we can do is try to work within, the framework of what we can at this point in time. It'd be great to put a requirement into every zone that, 20, 15, 10% of the housing built in the zone needs to be affordable housing. But we can't do that right now based on the guidelines, and we may in the future. They may revert back to the typical round 1 and round 2 type of regulations versus the round 3, because round 3 went through 2 iterations and they've been challenged already twice. So it might be, going back to the simpler process, which I believe was much simpler than this, the growth share, massive calculations. I think it was sort of a lot of work for not a lot of results.
Okay. Since we don't have third round COLA, our third round COLA approved.
No one has third round COLA approved, that's the whole point. There is no
They
third
threw
round.
out the ones they did approve. They had half the counties, half the towns had gotten third round COLA approval.
But the rules were thrown. So right now, we're
So
waiting.
none of them have it right now.
Uh-huh. Well, so right now, the third round rules are they're before the Supreme Court, and we don't know what the end result is going to be. Whenever someone may have something approved, but to the extent that it's approved and it's still valid under the law, they're fine. But if the Supreme Court changes the rules, we also don't know what the Supreme Court's going to say. The Supreme Court may grandfather in, people already have approved. The point is we just don't know.
Okay, I just want to make sure that what you're putting in here, first of all, the financial incentives doesn't make any sense to me at all if they're going to actually require, and we are required and have ordinances in place to require affordable housing. I don't get an incentive for, doing the speed limit. I do it because it's the law.
Okay.
Talk to COA.
Next question,
Yeah, I know
Mary.
that.
We went on a long time.
Yeah. Then on all the new
John, I just have a question.
Sorry.
We're going through things. I mean, I know Mary Hogan's been up for about 19 minutes, but we're going through things. I think it's important to get these questions out there. She's brought them up to the mayor and council. So I just think let's get out there. I mean, we might have went a little too long on the COA.
Right,
Which
I didn't
which I
mean for that.
apologize. But I mean, I just think these are valid things, especially with the zone change.
The NXD 1, 2, and 3 all have a lot coverage clause, which talks about, it's on page 4 of mine, I don't know what page it is on. It's called lot coverage. It's under all 3 of them, so.
Yep.
And it talks about having a green roof. So if you have a green roof on a building, your impervious coverage, your pervious coverage is increased by 75% of whatever the green roof is. Correct. And the green roof is defined as vegetation and passive recreations for the occupants. So if you have your tennis courts on the roof, then you can get a 75% considered pervious coverage, even though.
That's not passive recreation, that's active recreation.
Okay, so what's passive?
Passive is basically green stuff, vegetation, landscaping, you know, with benches and things like that. That's passive. Active is tennis courts and basketball
Okay,
courts,
so-
that type of thing.
All right, that's defined somewhere in the passive and summer.
Honestly, I don't know that it's defined in our ordinance. I didn't know that it needed to be defined, but,
Well, I'm just
but we
asking.
can,
Sunday, they could be passive.
But it's passive. That's
Yes, it's
far.
passive, meaning that there's actually green
Okay.
vegetation.
Catherine, there's an industry standard as to what that means, correct?
I'm sorry?
There would be an industry standard as to what that would mean?
Yes, yes.
That's, I think that's more the question.
So basically, and your zoning in this area from, has taken the hillside on what we would call Old River Road from the gas station on Old River Road, all around there, and you're now putting that all into a MX1, which is 5 stories, 60 feet high. Is that correct?
All from the gas station over?
On the hillside as well as storage facility. Construction yard is 14 stories, but that already has an approval, I believe, for a hotel and stuff. Is that correct?
Yes, the storage facilities. So, yes, this encompasses each of
Yeah, so just so you're aware, all of those properties along there are all being rezoned to be 5 stories high. You know, where, you know, Washington has this construction stuff, the tire place.
I don't think that's correct, and I apologize. Catherine, when you go from the gas station, you mean the Exxon station?
This is the gas
Yeah.
station.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're going south.
Yes, down
You're saying when you go up west?
the West Hillside.
All that is MXD, one.
Yes.
I'm like,
Well, I
want to
only
pick him out?
took them from what she had given us, you know, who owns them and, oh, I'm sorry, there are 3s.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
D4 here.
And R3 height is, you know, it's multiple.
Oh, yes. Yeah, R3 would be townhouses.
All that.
No, I think it's, I did not bring my ordinance. I brought the tax maps this time, not the ordinance.
Well, here's something, the railroad tunnel. You know, Hague's properties along there, they're all 5 stories. Okay, property of the railroad tunnel. The portion that's owned by the borough,
That's about this location.
they're all gonna be, that's all 5, be the body shop. That's why I said I have to know them by, you know, pieces. They're all gonna be 5-story, 60 feet high. In the, this is section 10, and this is just a correction as far as I know. You put your MXD shoe, and maybe yours is corrected in that list that we were talking about before. And you have it as, although it would be very nice, I don't think it works. 14-story building and the height is 15 feet. I think it's just a typo, it's probably supposed to be 150.
Yeah, it's 150 feet in ours.
Oh, okay.
It's corrected.
150, it's 50 here what was introduced, so maybe that's a recommendation to make the mayor council to correct the ordinance.
That is a
150.
typo, because at least on our version, if we have the same one.
Yeah, I mean,
We have a new one right here.
There, the one, Mr.
There can't be a new one. I'm sorry, this is what was introduced.
No, first, what we have is a communication from the clerk, provides a copy of the ordinance And ours does have that
What's your ordinance number, 14585-2012?
1485-2012. What was introduced was a first reading, and as I wasn't there, generally it's a first reading.
Yes.
And the ordinance will have to be, that's what they notice for, so to the extent that there's a typographical error that was corrected prior to the second reading, I don't think they have to introduce a new ordinance, I think it's fine.
I'm not saying you do, but the public got an incorrect introduced ordinance.
Well, all they did was read the title. Correct.
After the ordinance was introduced on Monday, because we do not see the introduced ordinances. I put in an open request to the borough clerk and asked her to get a copy to me of the ordinance that was introduced on Monday night, and that's what she sent me.
Well,
This is different from what you are working off of, obviously.
First of all, this is just a typographical error that was obviously corrected by the municipal clerk, because they provided us a formal copy. And second of all, there will be on a second reading, a full opportunity for public comment and a public hearing where all these issues will be able to be brought out before there's a formal vote, which if there was a mistake, that can be corrected because it's not substantive, because it's typographical error. So either way, I don't think that's something that really needs to get into
What's
any
the
further
date of
here.
your letter that you got from the borough clerk?
November 20th.
Any more questions, Barry?
Yeah, because now I'm not sure what I got.
I'm pretty sure yours is.
Your MBX1 and your MBX3 shows minimum front yardage of 0 to 10 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
That means these buildings, like what I consider the terrible buildings in Fort Lee, can be built directly to the sidewalk. Because the maximum required is, the minimum required is 0. So within this code, the developer has the right to build to the sidewalk. And both these zones, 1 and 3, also have maximum impervious coverage of 90%. And the MXD2, which is the tall, the 14-story ones, has a coverage of 85% maximum. So what you're zoning here is to have properties that have no green space, well, except the green space on the roof, I guess.
Catherine, any comment?
Well, again, part of that was driven by improved developments and the desire to at least be conforming.
To make it conform, correct?
Right. So those are the types of things that the zoning board has been approving. So that's where that emanated from.
Basically, you're going by what was approved, and you're using that, and that's what you're moving forward from that.
Yes.
Okay.
But those buildings, those properties are not developed yet. So you have the power to make sure they have setbacks, like the Mount Bay. The physical building there goes into the sidewalk.
They have approval, correct?
Yeah, but I'm saying they go into the sidewalk. There's not much you can do. If you let them use the building, that's what you're gonna have to do. These other buildings are not that way. They are not 0 to the curb. But now you're gonna let them be 0. When they get knocked down, like Solar Color and whatever, those older buildings down. When you knock them down, now they're gonna build right to the curb. They can. I'm not saying they will, but they can. You're giving them permission without having to go before any board for that as a variance. I mean, if you want to let them do it, it's one thing. If you've just given them carte blanche that they can do it, don't even have to ask you, it's something else.
You're correct.
And that's, I have an objection to that.
Okay.
I think you should be requiring them to have the setbacks. If there's a special reason why they can't, fine.
Next.
The only other thing I want to point out to you is, and this is just a general comment, may not even, be appropriate here, but, the the master plan of a town is supposed to be drawn by this board, by the planning board, then the mayor and council put in the ordinances to support or not support, depending on whether they agree with you or not agree with you. The master plan of a borough is not to be driven by the Board of Adjustment and the approvals that the Board of Adjustment has to do. Because when you do that, then the master plan is being driven by the developers and not by the town. And that, I think, is a very unhealthy situation to be in. And I pointed this out to the mayor and council, of the 7 properties that are given higher designation, 5 of them belong to our local developer, which just points out that what it is that he wants, the town is going to change to do what he wants, not necessarily what the town wants.
Thank you very much, Mary. Anybody else from the member of the public wants to be heard? Valerie, state your name, spell your last name and your address. For the record, there's a 5-minute rule in place. If any of the questions come up that have been repeated, we'll just move on, because they have been answered.
Valerie Bardinez, Bardines, 16 Hudson Terrace, Edgewater, New Jersey. Can you, I didn't understand what you just meant.
If
So
you're
I'm
asking-
not allowed, if I don't
You can ask a question.
understand something,
You have 5 minutes.
so the 5-minute rule just starts with me?
Well, what I just said was, with the 5-minute rule has been in effect. There's some valid questions, but if you're going to just rehash some and make statements, we'll use the 5-minute rule. We've always done that.
Okay.
Don't
Did it
ask
just
the
start
same
now?
question.
I don't understand this.
No.
You're going to place a 5-minute rule on me, and she's wonderful, she's brilliant, but
No.
you should have made that statement first,
No,
right?
it's-
No, because we
Or am
have
I
a
being
5 minute.
singled out?
No, not at all. We have a 5-minute rule every week. Please ask your question. Okay.
I'm sorry, will you?
Please.
I thought he said something.
No.
Catherine, on page 2 here, the affordable housing units proposal inclusionary development statement you made.
Yes.
If the town in the southern end of the town is developed with the changes proposed, approximately how many affordable units will the development require?
I haven't done,
As developed, well, I'm sorry,
I haven't done that type of calculation.
you haven't done that type of calculation, figuring out how many, because this paragraph.
That's impossible to do. You can do a minimum and a maximum, but you can't.
Well,
predict
that's
the
what I
exact
meant, did you
number.
do a minimum or a maximum?
No.
No, because this seems very specific, this paragraph, and why I'm asking that, when you say a financial incentive, and I know you just had that whole dialogue about what COA, the third rounds haven't been established yet, and it's in the Supreme Court, I get that. However, this financial state incentive has me puzzled because our planning board attorney did say that we do have our own affordable housing ordinances in effect still. Is that right?
Yes.
So, and then Ms. Hogan brought up by abiding by the law anyway, without an incentive, if we are obligated by our own ordinances to provide affordable housing, why therefore would we need to provide a financial incentive, and why the extra density? Isn't that sort of like the tail wagging the dog? You're giving extra density, which would therefore trip additional affordable housing requirements. I'm really confused. And if we are bound by our own ordinances to provide affordable housing, why is that necessary?
Why is what necessary?
Why is it necessary to increase the density or to provide financial incentives?
Because the existing ordinances don't apply to developments that are going forward.
So then the town is not protected by our own ordinances with affordable housing? Because I thought that's what you said.
For any development that was approved while the ordinance.
While the COA, but what about our own ordinances? We have our own COA ordinances on record, which is a certain percentage that is supposed to be included on site.
No,
And
we
if you
don't.
want,
We do not have that.
we have a code ordinance. We don't have a code ordinance?
That ordinance is null and void based on the initial round three rules.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand, because, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Before, you made a statement that we were protected by our own ordinances with COA. When Ms. Hogan said, well, then what if they don't just build any COA? If they don't provide any? They don't have to. If COA is not mandated by, like you said, it's still in the Supreme Court. And you said we are still protected by our own ordinances. They still have to adhere, so.
There are many developments here that are under construction, that are approved, that have yet been built, that were approved under the old COA structure, and they're still obligated under those COA structures to fulfill those obligations. With regards to new development, as Catherine was saying, right now, the requirements of the state have not been set yet. So the developers will have to comply with whatever is set when the state comes around and provides those requirements.
Which has nothing to do with our own ordinances.
Well, our
Our ordinance does.
our ordinance are governed by the state. Our ordinance would be in compliance with the state. That's where we follow, that's where we get that from.
I think I can also help clarify that. The ordinances that we have, in fact, are only for use variance applications. In other words, if someone comes in for a use variance, then we can make them pay a portion in lieu. There's a sort of a formula based on equalized assessed value. The difference is if someone comes in the R5 zone, they don't have to provide any affordable housing because it's a permitted use. And right now, there is no structured ordinance that we can require them to provide affordable housing on site. So therefore, based on what we're doing here, we are providing those incentives in zones where we'd like to see this development, because obviously, yes, it's somewhat market-driven, but the fact is that now when we make these all conforming uses, then we have the ability to provide these financial incentives. The difference with the use variance, and then maybe your answer to that is, well, why don't we just leave them as use variances, let them come in, and that's all well and good, but then what happens is the burden becomes the borough's burden, because that payment goes into our affordable housing trust fund.
Well, can I just stop you there? Because I believe me, pretty well versed with COA in some ways that I didn't want to be.